So you might have heard about Manus AI. This, I think, is fair to say, is the world's first autonomous AI agent. I got a chance to test it out, and you need to see this really fast. Here are some of the other people that I follow online that have tested it. Here's McKay really saying it's legitimately impressive. And as a reminder, I don't do paid posts. He's kind of blown away by it. Starting to freak out a little bit. I may have undersold this. What in the world did I get access to here? Without exaggeration, I'm genuinely being super earnest about this. I think this experience has shifted my worldview a bit. That was basically 80% of what I imagine experiencing AGI will be like. And I agree with what he's saying. And I do have a need to tell you that no, this is not sponsored. No one's paying me to say these things. This is, I think, the first example of a fully autonomous AI agent. This seems way ahead of OpenAI, of Anthropic. I think this is what OpenAI is planning to release as their, $20,000 a month or $10,000 or $2,000 a month agents. I think this is that. There's a couple of things that it did that I don't understand how it did that. It seems very smart across the board. But yeah, I think March 7th, this thing was released. I think that is the day we entered the era of autonomous AI agents. So I was able to run 5 tests on it before hitting my limit. I've requested an increase. There's like a 1 million person waiting list. So we'll see if that's a possibility. But take a look and let me know what you think. About 5 minutes ago, I got access to Manus. Let's go. All right, so first and foremost, we have standard high effort. So the high effort mode employs a longer chain of thought and performs more detailed tasks. Breakdown, though it requires more processing time during the experimental period, this mode is limited to 1 use per day. All right, we'll save that for last. We'll stick with standard for now. So first and foremost, let's do some research on the AI-made games that are kind of going nuts. You might have seen Fly Peter, right? So that game that was coded up with Grok and Claude 2 by Peter Levels. I think last I checked, it's pulling in something like 100,000 per month based on this fairly simple game that was coded up fairly quickly using AI technology. So we're going to say research video games that were created recently using AI. For example, using Cursor, Grok 3, Claude 3.7, etc. One example is flypeter.com. Basically, whatever they're doing, however they're making the code, as long as it's utilizing AI to build it, that's what we're looking for. So let's research the top 5 to 10 games like that. It must have been built in the last 3 months or so. Get details about these games, like how they were built, who is the creator, list any resources the creator posted online talking about how this was built, like videos, X-posts, etc. Let's say YouTube videos. So if they have YouTube videos talking about how they built this thing or posts on X about it, we want to see those. Then create a website that showcases all of this with links to the game, to the creator, and a summary about the most important things about the game. Make the website have the aesthetic feel of a 90s video game. And away we go. So I've covered some of this in the previous video, but what completely blew away my mind about Manus is the way that they've built it. So far, I've only seen other people using it. This is the first time that I'm using it hands-on, but as far as I could tell from the previous videos posted online, Manus itself, it has its own sort of computer, its own cloud computer that's running Linux. Specifically, it looks like Ubuntu, and it's got access to the command line, meaning it's kind of a super user on an open source operating system, which, if done correctly, basically gives it tons of power to do a lot of different stuff. So as you can see here, the layout is a little bit similar to Devin by Cognition AI, to where you kind of have these different windows and you can kind of look through to see what it's doing. So here is a list of all of the sort of websites that it's looking to, and we can scroll forward to see where it is in the process. All right, so as you can see here, it created a todo.md. So in Linux, MD is a markdown file. So you can kind of think of it as a text editor, but with like a little bit more functionality. So it can be used for code, for text, etc. And as you can see here, it broke down the tasks. I gave it into subtasks. We have the search phase, the research phase, the website creation, etc. And for each one of those, it has subtasks, and it shows it completing the subtasks as it goes along. So as you can see here, it's searching YouTube. I'm trying to find a shot of where it actually is using the terminal, because we saw it pretty clearly in another video that I saw online. Interestingly, we can also use Manus's computer. Looks like we use VS Code or browser. We'll do that later. I don't want to mess it up right now. It looks like it does get blocked by Reddit. So a lot of the times when you're using these, virtual machines, it's not like an actual desktop sitting somewhere. It's just a virtual machine that's kind of simulating a desktop experience. But as you can see here, we can take control. So they've basically recreated Operator, OpenAI's Operator. They've also recreated a lot of the functionality in Claude Coder, the brand new thing, the research preview that they've released. So here is the live view. So is it just sitting there watching a video? I wonder. That's very interesting. I'd be surprised if it actually watches the videos. I don't think anything right now currently actually does that. Most of them just use the transcript and use the text in the transcript. Meanwhile, I will do another test on it. So one thing that I really wanted to test with this is to see how well it's able to do coding. Now, currently, my understanding is this isn't its main thing that it's supposed to be doing. I don't expect good results, which is fine. This is not going to lower my opinion of it. This is more like a web surfing agent, like a knowledge worker, something that can do some coding, like creating HTML websites, etc. But it's not the software engineer quite yet. But this is what we're going to do. We're going to say lots of people want to get started using Linux to create things with AI. Let's create a full online course about how to do that, including videos, lessons, links to resources, etc. Start by creating a walkthrough of how to install Ubuntu. So walk them through the basics of using Ubuntu. They will need to install something called Claude Coder. I will go ahead and drop the link in there just so it doesn't get confused. Later, I'm going to test it specifically on how well it's able to find this information online. But currently, I'm testing something different. I don't want it to trip up on that particular thing because I'm testing something else. And I guess I'm kind of assuming that it will have some weaknesses or mistakes. We'll see. It might not, but teach them the basics. They need to install Claude Coder and the commands that they need. So there's like just a handful of commands that you have to be able to run in order to install Claude Coder. So we don't want to like overwhelm the person, but at the same time, they need like 3 or 4 different things that they have to type in order to proceed. Assume little to no Linux experience prior to this. Then explain what GitHub is and how to use it. And then find one simple project they can try on GitHub by using Claude Coder to clone the repo. This will be a lesson that demonstrates how you use GitHub and Claude Coder in conjunction. Okay, so this is where it sort of like generates the lesson plan. And the next step will be actually creating the website with the lesson plan. Make it in dark mode. So create the website that has all the lessons and walkthroughs. Make it in dark mode with a black and yellow theme. All right, so we're going to click go. So for the people that may be not familiar with what I'm talking about here, so basically a lot of the stuff that gets released in the sort of the AI space often gets released on Linux and Apple first because they are sort of similar. Apple's OS is sort of built on the same sort of foundation as Linux. And so if you're a Windows user, very often you're going to be waiting for the updates or stuff is not going to work as intended. Claude Coder, I could not get it to run on Windows. And I do believe more and more people will get interested in using Linux, especially since things like this run on Linux. I think a lot more things will start running on Linux, things like Ubuntu, etc. Ubuntu is sort of a flavor, a distribution of Linux, a kind of a version of it customized for certain specific things. And back in the days, 5-10 years ago, it was fairly difficult, at least for people that don't have a lot of experience with it. It had a bit of a learning curve. Now, not only is it getting a lot better to use because of all the AI tools that you can use with it, but also it's getting a lot easier to learn because the AI can assist you in using it. If you have Linux open, the terminal in one sort of window and then something like ChatGPT in another, ChatGPT will just walk you through all the commands and exactly what to do. And it's pretty good at doing so. So I think this is going to be, I'm kind of calling it now, I think there's going to be a lot more interest in stuff like this. So what I'm trying to do here is to create a beginner-friendly guide to how to get into it, right? So, and it's going to cover a lot of, before you had things like ChatGPT to help you out, doing this would be, fairly difficult for a beginner, figuring out how GitHub works, figuring out how Claude Coder works, how to use the command line. All these things would have a steep learning curve. But as hopefully you'll see, now it's a lot easier to get in there and start building and start tweaking things and figuring out how they work, which I think is going to be a lot more interesting for people. So let's leave that to do its thing. Oh, and here we can see Manus using the terminal. Okay, so we're still able to see it. So let me move this over here. So this is Manus using the Ubuntu terminal, right? So as you can see here, it's actually typing in, change directory, go to this directory. And so it usually what it does when you give it a task, a project, it starts by creating a new directory that it's going to work on. So each project is its own directory, and whatever assets, whatever files it creates to complete that project go into that directory. So this is very similar to Claude Coder. And as you can see here on the previous page, actually I can probably go back. So as you can see here, so it needs Cloudflare workers. So this is likely for creating the website that we asked it for. So as you can see here, it's initializing a Git repository. So GitHub is a place where a lot of people store code that anybody can use, right? So I can go there, and if somebody created a piece of software that does something, I can just clone that to my computer, and then I can use it or work on it to upgrade in some ways. I can either fork it, meaning I can kind of create a different version and take it into sort of whatever direction I want to, or contribute to the original. It's kind of this open source ecosystem. So here it's using that to, I'm assuming this is for building the website. So it looks like it's using, it's talking about database config. It's using a SQL file to reset the database, or rather, this is probably some documentation that it's reading about how to do that. And so if we go live, here is the layout.tsx, which includes the HTML text for the website that we've asked for. Notice it's adding all the, the copyright and all of that stuff in the footer. So kind of like knows how to do that stuff. This is the cool thing about kind of the agents like this, because, when you're dealing with a chatbot, there's a certain context window. So it tries to shorten things up, right? So if you go to project that's massive, it can't run it in one thing. By creating these kind of agentic structures, you kind of create these like loops that it's able to do, like now do this, now do this, now do that, now do this, right? And it can do one thing at a time. And here it explains the showcase, right? So this is the AI game development thing. So it's saying this website highlights the incredible progress in AI assistant game development. All these games were built in the last 3 months. So we're beginning to see the power of these AI agents, right? So you kind of give it this top level goal, and it has enough intelligence to not only figure out how to break it into little pieces, but when it gets to, for example, creating the website, it knows, okay, like I need to describe what this website is, right? Because it has to appear in, for example, Google, search results. Plus the people that are looking at the website have to know what it is. So it figures out how to describe it based on the description I gave to it, right? So it takes kind of the words that I've used, translates them into the description of the website. It's little things like that. Like normally you would have to have a human being that sat there and thought about that and rewrote it, right? And there's a little bit of a cognitive load involved with that, but it's low level. It's, kind of boring if that's all you had to do. It's not high level tasks. The huge thing about AI agents like Manus is that a lot of that stuff it can do for you, right? And then if it's off, if you want to improve it, you can step in and manually adjust things, or just tell it to try again, or specify how it should do it, etc. So we have a space shooter by Alex Finn, Frogger with Rocket Launch by Micah, Flight Simulator by Peter Levels, Shooter Game by Jagger Bellagarda, and a 3D scene by AI-oriented dev. I think I'm familiar with like 2 or 3 of those. So as you can see here, it's creating a kind of a development environment to render the website locally. So we'll come back to this, but so far this little robot is doing a great job. Very, very proud. So it looks like going back to the Linux AI course, it's now on GitHub and it's checking out, okay, so it found a Python artificial intelligence projects for beginners, which is probably the thing that it's going to use as its demonstration project. Wow. So for a second there, if you saw that, let me see if I can go back. So for a second there, I can't quite find that frame, but for a second there, you could see the bounding boxes around kind of all the usable objects on screen. So that's how it seems like it's like able to navigate stuff like that, which is interesting. So that's not quite how the OpenAI operator does it. The OpenAI operator, if I understand, it actually uses like real vision, the vision model looking at the screen and then moving the mouse to click on it. This still has some sort of it finds the different objects on there and then goes to click on them. And there are sort of pros and cons to both. From what I've seen, kind of the advantages to using something like this is you're going to be much faster and much more accurate within the things that approach can do. But there's going to be some like weird use cases where it doesn't quite work like that, right? So if it's having a hard time defining certain little things on the screen as objects, it might miss those. But for most of the stuff online, this is going to be the faster, more accurate, just easier approach. So as you can see here, one of the courses that it walks you through is setting up your environment. So if you're going to code with Python, it's very good to use a certain virtual environments to make sure that kind of everything works well within that environment where you have all the tools that you need, the correct version, right? It's just a way to manage the complexity a little bit. So they're walking you through exactly how to do that. So you have your terminal bash, you create a directory, you navigate to that directory, you create a virtual environment, you activate the virtual environment, and then within that environment, you install the required packages. This looks terrific so far. Then it walks you through how to use Claude Coder to clone the repo. This looks great, I gotta say. So far, I'm very, very impressed. All right, but let's test its coding abilities. Is it a coder? So we're gonna create a Three.js game where you control a plane. Make the plane a World War II fighter plane. Create several environments to fly over, like ocean, forest, city, add a day and night cycle, create an attack function that fires machine guns, and we're going to say add lots of visual effects to make it realistic. Smoke, lens flares, tracer rounds for the machine gun, clouds, etc. So let's start there and see where this takes us. If it nails this, that I gotta say would be fairly impressive. So there's this new thing. So it says knowledge suggestions when pending. So let's see what this is. Okay, so this is a way to store like permanent knowledge or memory, as OpenAI calls it. So when I ask for a Three.js WW2 fighter plane, it's saying, should we just assume you want all of those things in there, which is pretty cool. Not quite there yet, because I want to see how it works on this first attempt, and then later maybe we'll add that as an addition to every single prompt. This is going to be very effective if you're doing the same thing over and over again. So, but we're going to reject it for now. All right, but that was child's play. Well, not really. It's kind of complicated, but let's see if we can crank up the difficulty just a little bit. We're going to ask it to do this. So we're going to create a tool that takes a prompt like a woman is talking about how amazing this hamster cage product is, and an LLM of my choice writes out a script for that. Then that script gets voiced over in Eleven Labs with the voice of my choosing. Then that voiceover is fed into HeyGen to create a video avatar that says the thing, that says that script. And use the APIs for everything. I will provide API keys. And by the way, keep in mind that if it fails at any one of these, then we can always bump it into that extended thinking mode. So once we figure out like where the limit is, we'll test that out as well. All right, so here we got a notification. Manus is attempting to deploy a service located at, whatever. So basically it's asking me if it's okay to deploy the application to the public network. Yeah, why not? Unleashing this AGI onto the internet. What could possibly go wrong? All right, so here we have, so it's hitting an M error, which is a package manager for JavaScript. But as you can see here, so when it encounters an error, it just completes, it keeps troubleshooting and figuring out how to get around it, etc. Creating an optimized production build. So not that long ago, if you recall, we were sitting here kind of like dreaming, anticipating the day then something like this would exist, where you tell it to do something and it just goes off. Because I mean, some of these things have been running for 20 minutes now, right? So for 20 minutes from one prompt, this thing is sitting there and just thinking and working and doing and troubleshooting, optimizing with almost zero input from me. Now, if it's able to create these World War II fighter plane games, by the way, look at this subtask, right, list, this game development, right? Look at how many subtasks it created, right? Environments, ocean, forest, city, environment switching mechanism, day-night cycle, machine, like look at that. So we're about, I don't know, 20 minutes in maybe, and we're less than a third of the way, maybe a third of the way into it completing all the things. By the way, really fast. So if it can do something like this and keep on adding various functionality to it in an effective manner, why is that important, right? Is it just that, oh, now you have a little shooting plane game that you can mess around with? Well, again, this is the Fly Peter game that he created very, very quickly. So, you can have the various different things that you can purchase, different planes like the F-16, but we'll just start with the Cessna. All right, so I'll have the sound off so it doesn't get too annoying, but this game is a multiplayer, so you're able to fly around with a lot of different people all over the world. And as you can see here, like right, this blimp says a synth flow on it, etc., freelancer, whatever, right? So these are people that chose to pay money to advertise within this game, and this game is pulling in quite a bit of money from these advertisements. Even if I see it correctly, an advertisement on the moon. Can't quite tell what it is, but it's there, right? And that game rapidly scaled up to where it's making 50,000 a month. And I've even been seeing potentially got up to 100,000 a month in monthly recurring revenue. Or maybe it's not recurring if it's like a sponsorship placements. I'm not sure. But the point is, it's a lot from something that was created very quickly. So initially it was made in just 30 minutes with AI tools. So it kind of gives you a glimpse into how quickly these things are proceeding, because when, Claude 3.7, Grok 3, when they came out, it really supercharged developers to create a lot of this stuff. Things that could be scaled up very, very quickly to make significant amounts of money. So people used something like Cursor, which is a development environment that's integrated with these large language models like Claude or O3 Mini High, whichever one you prefer. But you still needed to know some things in order to kind of use it. You still had to have some technical background. With this, and again, we have to see how well it's going to complete these tasks. But it does seem more and more that these large language models, these AI tools, they're kind of separating the human from like the code, the command line. Because, in the very beginning, a long, long time ago, everything had to be written out by hand, right? So each word, each letter of the code had to be done by a human. Each command line had to be written out, on a keyboard, etc. And now, as you can see here, this AI tool is running the commands in the command line. It's creating the documents, it's populating it with code. So far, I didn't do anything. I didn't write one bit of code. I wrote everything out in natural language, in English. And the important thing to keep in mind is, so I don't know how well this thing is going to come out, like the coding, how well it's going to come out. But here's the thing, that the large language models that are being used by this, I don't know exactly what they're using, but they're saying that they've been fine-tuned. So they took some probably open source large language model, they've fine-tuned it to be good at, being Manus, etc. And that's what's being used. And they said that they're going to open source this thing later this year, 2025. So think about that for a second. So in 2025, let's say you have this entire sort of scaffolding, right? What Manus is. So if you think of this thing as a scaffolding plus a large language model, that's kind of what this is. And by scaffolding, I mean the thing that's, kind of like, that kind of says, okay, so first thing, create these subtasks and then run these commands, right? So it kind of like turns this into an agent, right? Allows it to surf the web, etc. But I think the important thing to understand here is that if it is open source, then, and the whatever large language models that they're using under the hood isn't the top of the line, they can very simply switch in the top of the line, right? You can put in Claude 3.7 Sonnet or Grok 3 or O3 Mini High, or anytime the next big thing comes out, you just put it in there. I'm curious to know if they're using DeepSeek for this. That would certainly make sense. All right, so here it's saying it's waiting for user. All right, so this is Manus. It says, thank you for your patience. It's very, very polite. I like that. Okay, so it says we've completed the Ubuntu installation, basics, etc. And it's saying, should I just continue working, making the adjustments, or show you a preview? I'm going to say preview. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm going to say preview, please. This thing is a little bit too advanced. I feel like I should be polite back. Preview, please. So it's going to deploy a temporary version so you can see how it looks with the dark theme using black and yellow colors. Meanwhile, our AI generated video games, so it's also asking if it should deploy to the public network. Let's say go for it. And our automated video creation with LLM and APIs, it's asking for the API keys. Now, interestingly, in Anthropics and Claude Coder, when it's time to get to the point where, you give up your API keys to the thing, I mean, there's obviously security issues with that. So Claude Coder refuses to do it. But then if you just, you copy and paste your API key in there, it kind of like, lectures you about it, kind of grumbles about it. It's like, well, you really shouldn't do that, young sir. But it does still take the API keys and put it where it's supposed to go. Again, don't do this, or at least be aware of the risks of doing this. I'm willing to be your guinea pig to test this thing out, but there are security issues with just doing something like this. All right, so I added all of my API keys. This is one of those things where you have to be careful what you're doing. I plan to delete those API keys after testing this thing, and before uploading this video, but I've created unique API keys for testing this thing. And later, if I wanted to use it long term, I would actually have to go in myself and add those keys in a secure way. But let's take a look at our AI generated video game research preview. So we're going to click to view, and wow, it is glorious. Absolutely glorious. Oh, wow. And it's got the little scrolling text. Absolutely incredible. Look at that. Games created with AI tools like Cursor, Grok 3, and Cloud 3.7 in the last 3 months. So kind of literally copied what I said, but that's okay. No coding experience required. The future of game development is here. Okay, and it added those. This is good. So far, so good, right? Wow. All right, recently created with AI. We got the Space Shooter game by Alex Finn. It's got, oh, and it like has a little pop-up thing. Wow, okay. This is very good. And look at that, it writes out how it was created. We can click on more info and it gives us more info. Wow. Used Grok's deep research for research and planning. Used Grok's Think or Cloud 3.7 to execute the code, deployed via GitHub, all the resources. It gives how many followers this person has. Look at that. It's got the YouTube channel, a newsletter, a website. Notable results. It got multiple Elon Musk retweets. Very, very cool. But okay, but where's the game, dude? Okay, so it doesn't have a link to the game, but not everybody hosts their game online. But I know Fly Peter does. So let's see if it has the, oh, okay. So it has a play game and more info. Okay. And so this Winter 3D game. Okay. So if I click play game, okay, it takes me to this thing. If I click play game, it takes me to the game. This is terrific. Okay. So that's good. Okay. So this is the game. You can click to move the bear around, zoom in and out. Okay. Very, very cool. All right. And it provides the AI tools used as well as the creator resources. It tells you how to recreate this thing. So basically what I was trying to do with this particular prompt is, right now people are super interested in all these games. People want to learn how to create them. People want to see who's creating what. And it would be kind of cool to have like one resource, one website that has, an ever updating list of all these games with any resource that we know about how to create these games. And if you wanted to recreate it, how would you go about recreating that? Now, obviously, if you were doing it yourself, that would be kind of a pain in the butt, right? It would take a lot of time, a lot of research. But as you can see here, this was all done with, me being AFK basically, right? I give it a prompt, I go away. Now, the next step would be to see how well we're able to add on to this, right? So can we include more resources? Can we include more games? I mean, you can imagine just having that thing kind of run every 24 hours or whatever, updating this database in real time, basically creating a perfect sort of ever updated resource for people looking for this stuff. I'm blown away. I am absolutely blown away. Okay. I mean, this is A+, right? This is kind of mind blowing from one prompt. Keep in mind, we're going to test sort of iterating on this, but so far, wow. Okay, so it presented the final deliverables to user. Okay, we're going to come back to this, but wow. All right, so our Ubuntu course is ready to be deployed to the public network. Go for it. Did we not say that already? I'm not sure. Oh, okay, so this is the preview. It's asking us, do we want to continue working it or do we want to get the preview? And the WW2 fighter plane is still working. Automated video creation is still working. And so it looks like there's a Manus.space where it hosts these things for its user. So it kind of generates a random username for you and then creates it. So mine is gizzyyazzle.manus.space. So I'll post this link down below if you wanted to check it out. This is throwing me a little bit here. This feels like a little bit too good. You know what? I'm going to start a new session here and I'm going to say, research everything you can about Manus AI. What LLM are they using for it? Who's behind it? What vision model are they using, etc.? Anything and everything about how this thing is made. Let's see where that takes us. All right. And it looks like our World War II fighter plane game is ready to be tested out. It has been submitted for our approval. All right. So we're getting a little error. So we got an error message. I'm just going to post it right back in there. You know that meme where Fry from Futurama is like, shut up and take my money. This might be one of those products where it's like, I feel like I need a subscription to this. I want to be testing out like the extended version of it. This thing is kind of bonkers. All right, let's do one more thing. So, all right, let's say I invested $1,000 each into the following stocks: NVIDIA, Microsoft, Google, Tesla, Amazon, Meta on January 01, 2020. So create a cool looking display of my investments, include a way to customize the view to see the data in detail. So let's see how it sort of interprets that. I literally was just saying how like, just, shut up and take my money. I want to keep using it. I ran out of my standard, but I still have sort of one high effort task remaining. And ideally, I'm going to use that for whatever it fails to do or for whatever it sort of like struggles with. Here is our fighter plane jet fighting thing, and it's not showing up. Okay, so right off the bat, it doesn't seem to be functioning. So I uploaded a screenshot and I said the heads up display shows up but nothing else. So I think it should be able to figure that out. And so it's on it. So it looks like we can still continue going back and forth with the previous projects. We just can't start new ones. Interestingly, it has these little sort of icons displaying. So this one's like stocks or charts, right? This one's gaming. So it's pretty good at naming and visually kind of referencing these. So it's a little bit easier to find. All right, I'll go ahead and delete this one for the time being. And here's our Linux AI development course. That's looking pretty neat. So we might mess around to change the visuals, but so far so good. So you can start with start learning. So it walks you through understanding Ubuntu, what you need to do before you begin, backing up your data, etc. It's got you links to where you need to go, creating a bootable USB drive with link to Rufus. Phenomenal. It seems perfect. I'm not going line by line, but man, yeah, everything is just like it's nailing all the points, the various, stuff you need to get started, just the basics, right? Graphic drivers, etc. Walks you through the terminal, how to start the terminal, gives you the keyboard shortcut, perfect. How to navigate through the terminal. This is terrific. I mean, I guess that's not that impressive. I mean, because this is available in like 50 million different places online. So this shouldn't be that impressive, but notice that it did do a very good job. What I wanted, what I described it, because in this one, I gave it very specifically. Here's what I want. It did that, I would say, flawlessly. Yeah, it's going through node.js and then how to install Claude Coder. If I was going to nitpick just a little bit, this does not belong here. So they've copied this from the installation page on Anthropic and saying, if you're using Windows subsystems. So yeah, I mean, that's an important thing to know, but in the context of this thing, we're not. So this is literally how to install Linux and then use it. So, but again, I can't say that this is wrong. It's just maybe not needed, probably not needed, but otherwise terrific. Then we have a brief GitHub tutorial and a project demo. Okay, so this is where I was curious if I was going to drop the ball or not. So basically what we're doing is we are asking you to do something that the documentation for which isn't really available online. Because, normally if you wanted to install a project from GitHub, there's documentation on that. If you want to install Claude Coder, there's documentation on that. But if you wanted to use Claude Coder to have Claude Coder install clone the GitHub repository, there's not going to be a lot of information on that. It's kind of a brand new thing. So I was curious to see if it would figure it out. This, to me, shows that whatever model they're using under the hood is smart, is powerful. This isn't some half-baked model they're using. It figured it out based on context. Because again, there's not a lot of data out there on this. So it figured out that in order to clone the repository with Claude Coder, you don't run the commands yourself. You tell Claude Coder, I want to clone this project from this person or whatever on GitHub. So I hope you understand kind of what I'm saying here. Like this thing that it did right here, this whole thing, this took intelligence, this took learning. This is not available online. There's not a lot of resource that spell this out. This is kind of crazy, I gotta say. I'm curious what they're using, what model they're using for this. And they're saying Claude Coder will help you with the process, suggesting the appropriate git command. How do they know this? As far as I can tell, it read the manual. It read Anthropic's manual. This is way better than I would have expected. I am kind of blown away. This thing seems smarter than it should be. Yeah, and walks you through how to use Claude Coder, exploring the database, adding visualizations, and it's literally telling you how to commit changes to GitHub again with Claude Coder. How did it get, this seems like it's an output from Claude. I'm wondering if it actually installed Coder on its own thing to then run it. It's something, this is weird. I'm a little bit blown away. This is throwing me for a loop here. Okay, I'm not 100% sure how it did that. So I know that it read Anthropic's documentation on Claude Coder. So as far as I can tell, it understood what Claude Coder was kind of like, and it was able to kind of imagine what it would say and what it would do in those scenarios. Maybe I'm missing something, but this whole thing kind of feels next level somehow. Next, we're testing our fighter plane, but Sandbox not found. So we just paste that right back in there. So it did a lot of research on itself, basically, and it's saying that Manus likely employs technology similar to DeepSeek R1 and V3 models. While the specific vision model isn't explicitly named, Manus has confirmed multimodal capabilities, including image processing and analysis as part of its system. So we've tested uploading a screenshot, but now that I think about it, I actually kind of told it what's in the screenshot. As one of our next tests will be kind of like just uploading visual information to see how well it's able to do that. Because I did kind of spell it out in the text. I said, this is what's rendering, this is what is not rendering. So it didn't even need a screenshot really. And Manus uses a multi-agent architecture where specialized AI sub-agents operate independently under executive oversight. It features cloud-based asynchronous operation and sandboxed virtual environments for safety. So there was a little bit of a confusion here because it's created a README file. It's like, oh, clone the repository, but there's no repository. It's just a bunch of files that it has on its computer. So we kind of had to go back and forth and I have to say, okay, just zip all the files and give them to me. Now, what I think might be happening is that since we ran out of our sort of quota for the day, and now we're still going back and forth and talking within a certain project, maybe downgrades you to a different model that's not quite as capable. I'm going to need to do more testing to like figure it out, but this seems like a fairly simple problem to solve. Basically, it thinks that all the files are, that you have all the files, but it's actually on its computer. So you have to kind of connect the dots for it, but we'll see if it works. All right, but next we have our video creation with LLM and APIs, ElevenLabs. So the HeyGen API, it could not get it to work. There seem to be some issues. We're going to look at that later. So the time being, I just said, use OpenAI to create a script and then ElevenLabs to voice that script. So it completed it. It gave me the project file here and it explained how to install it. So I just copy and pasted the command it told me to, and then installed all the requirements. We run the command and we just type in whatever prompt we want into it. So we're going to say Manus is the best AI agent app for world domination. So let's see what it does with that. And so what it's doing is it's sending that through an API to the OpenAI client, and the OpenAI, whatever model we're using, 4.0 probably, it sort of creates a little script of a person kind of like talking about how awesome the thing is that I've requested. Then it takes that script, it sends it to the ElevenLabs API so that it's able to produce it in an AI voice. And then it takes that and saves it in this folder. So here we have the generated script and the speech output. Let's take a listen.
Hey everyone, if you've ever dreamed of taking over the world, or at least felt like you could manage things a bit better than the powers that be, then you've got to check out Manus, the ultimate AI agent app designed for, well, world domination. Now, I know how that sounds, a bit like a plot out of a sci-fi movie, right? But hear me out. Manus isn't just any app. It's designed with the kind of features that not only help you make smarter decisions, but actually anticipate problems before they arise.
It goes on for a while. So again, rating this, I mean, it's excellent. Again, it wasn't able to troubleshoot the Hey video generation, but I actually haven't used it in a while. So maybe there's some issues that I'm not aware of. So I'm going to try to, after this, see if there's like some issue that's caused by HeyGen. And if that's the case, I'll just provide a solution to this thing, because I feel like it should be able to do it. If this is caused by HeyGen, I would give it an A for this, for nailing the prompt. If this was something that it failed at, then that certainly marks it down to a B or a C+. But I still want to give it a very high rating because so much of it was done really well. I mean, created all the files. It taught me how to set up those files, right? How to run the application. So I gave it the API keys and it sort of put them in the config/env file. It has a README file. It even created like a web interface. Here's kind of what that looks like, right? If you say rats are not pets, I apologize if you have a rat, then we can select whatever voice that we want and click generate audio. So it's processing our request. And here's the generated audio.
Okay, let's talk about rats. Now, when you hear the word rat, what comes to mind? Maybe you think of dark alleys, or perhaps old cartoons with villains surrounded by these creatures. There's a good reason for these associations. Rats in the wild are—
So as you can see, there's a lot of good stuff happening here. The reason it has that fail to generate audio is some of these voices are like premium voices, and I think I've downgraded my subscription recently, so I can use the default voice, but not some of the other voices. But it throws up that error message, but it still completes the task with the default voice. All right, so here towards the end, so we kept getting console errors. I'm putting it back in there, and it says Manus performance may decline, so it stopped. So I think the reason that is happening is they're getting hit with a lot of people trying to test these things out. I'm sure they're melting their servers. So we've hit a limit a while ago, and we still continued, updating and going under each of the tasks that we were allowed to start. We kept doing follow-up questions, digging deeper and deeper. So I think probably I would assume maybe we got downgraded to a lesser model, and eventually this thing just stopped because we've hit some limit. So I don't quite want to give it a rating on this for a number of reasons. One, first of all, it's not a software development agent. It's kind of a general, well-rounded agent. Two, I should probably use the extended version of this because this is a fairly complicated prompt that requires a lot of coding, a lot of back and forth. And some of these issues I ran into with other coders as well. So I don't want to give it a final score without really testing it just on this prompt on its own when I have my full sort of a quota available to me, etc. But on all the other tasks, I gotta say, I'm kind of blown away. So the website about the AI generated video games made with a kind of 90s video game theme, I love it. I love everything about it. It is phenomenal, right? It really captured exactly what we wanted to. Gives a lot of info about the games, a lot of resources, everything. It's obviously doing its research, just phenomenal. It also links to the games themselves, also gives you more info. This is all I could have hoped for and more. And now if I'm able to, I can run follow-up commands to say, okay, add 5 more games or add these features that you want to talk about to every single game or every single listing, etc. We're at a point where if you're designing websites or you want a website designed for you, you don't have to hire somebody. You can just tell this thing what to do and it'll go in and do it. You'll update it. Eventually, if you can even schedule tasks, like every morning, go out there and find if there's a new game and add it to the resource. You're basically just kind of like queuing these things up to happen at certain intervals. That feature, as far as I know, is not available, but that's super simple. Everything else just seems to be there and ready to go. This is like A+. To me, just mind-blowing. So this is the Linux AI development course. It designed like a little vector graphic for it. And like I said, I was kind of blown away here because I was sure I was going to get some of these things wrong because some of the stuff isn't really like available online yet. Like how do you use Claude Coder to work with GitHub? It nailed it. And I'm not 100% sure how it did that. I'd be curious to know. Like it seemed like it just like read the manual and then just it's a really smart model underneath it that figured out how to sort of like put that information together. Just kind of mind-blowing. If I had to nitpick, there was like 1 or 2 things in there, specifically like this section that like I would not have put in there because again, the whole point of this is to install Linux, right? And it's saying here, if you're using Windows subsystems for Linux, you can do this. I understand why I put it there. It's not needed. So kind of like if I had to nitpick, I would say this section would not be in there, but everything else is just perfect, A+. Then we did a very simple just overview of Manus AI, and it brought back some really good information, and it gave me this whole massive research that it conducted, like just really deep dive onto every single member of the company, where it's coming from, what open source architecture it's using, DeepSeek, etc. I mean, just really, really huge in-depth things. And then also, and gave me this really simple, like 4 bullet point description that kind of gives me like the top level overview of what I need to know. Again, A+, probably a simpler prompt, but I was impressed with the sort of depth of knowledge, the little gems of wisdom that I was able to find online and fairly quickly too. Again, A+, blown away. Next thing is the automated, using OpenAI API to then write a script. That script uses the 11 Labs API to do a voiceover. That voiceover gets popped into HeyGen to create a video. It struggled a lot with setting up HeyGen. What I had to do is actually, I realized that I didn't have a HeyGen subscription at the time, so I re-enabled it. I regenerated the API key. I gave it to it. It still wasn't able to do it. So it didn't complete a part of the prompt, but I don't want to call it as that was its mistake. It might have been just something to do with my account at the time or how the API is. I still have to see why specifically it failed. So I don't want to grade it on that aspect of it, but the rest of it, it handled flawlessly. It gave me all the files. It created a README. It told me how like install it and run it locally. It even created a little web UI that I could use. It put the API keys in the right place, both for functionality and just like security. Basically, if it put the API keys kind of just in the main code, right, and then you wanted to upload it to GitHub, you'd sort of expose your API keys publicly. But there's certain locations where you're supposed to put your API keys so that if you're, sharing it with GitHub and stuff like that, those don't get shared. It put them in the right place. So not only does it understand how to like use them functionally, but also like where to put them for security purposes. And again, I would say this is an A+, assuming that the issue of the HeyGen was on HeyGen's side, not on Manus' side. But still, it's very impressive in any case. And our World War II simulation, I'm not ready to call it yet. I'm going to have to like rerun it and see what the issue is. It looks like we've hit the context window on here. So, and this makes sense. What I maybe should have done is actually once it completed it, I could have just thrown it in a cursor or something else and had that troubleshooted, because that's specifically made to be a software engineer, you know, an AI used for coding. This isn't. So this might not have been like the best way to test it. But based on everything I've seen, this is just extremely exciting, extremely capable. Multiple times where I was kind of like blown away by what it was able to do. And they're talking about open sourcing some of it. So I'm not sure exactly if they're doing everything, all of it, or just certain portions of it. So we'll see. But man, this thing feels very powerful, and it feels ahead of OpenAI and Anthropic in terms of like the AI agents sort of structure that they've created. So let me know what you think. But from my experience, from what I've seen online, people are losing their minds over this thing. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. My name is Wes Roth, and I'll see you next time.